What an amazing story Frieren has been so far, and what a pain in the ass it was to try and pick my top 5 moments from the first season. I can't really put into words how much I'm loving this story already, and that's with me having only seen the anime. I'm sure the continued story in the manga only gets better from here, and I'm very excited for season 2. Regardless of how tough it was, with so many great moments to choose from, I did compile what I see as the 5 that stood out to me the most. These moments are essentially selected based on how well I think they serve the narrative concepts of the story and the development of the characters combined with their emotional impact. Starting off with my number 5 moment, this is going to be from chapter 56, in which Frieren fixes Fern's broken staff. The staff breaks as a result of the battle with Frieren's clone during the first class mage exam, and this was difficult for Fern because the staff was a cherished gift that she had received from Heiter. So naturally, Fern's impulse is to try and repair the staff because of how special it is to her, and she cannot imagine being without it. But Frieren's response to this is that Fern would be better off just getting a new staff. This response is pretty typical of the old Frieren, the Frieren who didn't understand human emotions and made no attempt to. It is this type of response and this type of attitude from Frieren which led to her regret in not having gotten to know the members of her hero party better. But having vowed to not let that happen again, and by getting to know and understand people better, we can see the effect of that in this scene. While Fern pouts and expresses her discontent with Frieren's inability to understand her, Frieren acts in direct contrast to her initial comments about Fern's staff, and sets out on the town with the shards of the broken staff, determined to find a way to fix it. Now personally, I'm not quite sure that Frieren fully understands why exactly Fern is so emotionally attached to her staff, and why exactly it holds so much value to her. But despite that, she does know and understand that it is important to Fern. Frieren might have difficulty understanding these emotions and sentimental feelings due to the nature of her being an elf who lives for essentially an eternity, but even Stark in this scene admits that he doesn't quite understand Fern either. It might be for different reasons than Frieren, but human emotions are obviously quite complex, and we can never fully understand exactly what somebody else is feeling. So I think what makes this scene stand out to me is the fact that Frieren is trying. She's making an attempt. She wants to understand Fern better, and this attempt alone, and this effort alone, is enough. In spot number 4 for me is going to be the flashback which shows Heiter saving a young Fern. Fern had just recently lost her family in the war, so at this point she was orphaned, had nowhere to go, and was on the edge of a cliff, ready to end it all. That is, until Heiter steps in and saves her. He does so by telling her that it would be a waste if she were to stop living. Heiter explains how he considered living the rest of his life quietly and not doing anything of major significance until he realized that, if he did that, all of the memories of Himmel and the impact that Himmel had on him would be lost as well. And if Fern were to leave this world, all of her precious memories too would be lost along with her. This moment highlights to me what is one of the most core aspects of Frieren's story, and one of my favorite concepts in media, which is the idea that part of the essence of the people we are close with becomes a part of us through the memories we make with them and the impact that they have on us. So the more we get to know these people, the more of an impact they can have on us, and the more of that impact that can then be passed on and shared with others. Sharing and spreading that positive impact is an important and necessary job, and one that Frieren has now clearly taken on. Speaking of sharing, this next moment relates to the idea of shared joy. Moment 3, it's the scene in which Frieren and Fern both enjoy the sunrise at the New Year's festival. Frieren has been in this town before with the hero party, so she's familiar with their custom of viewing the sun as it rises over the water on the morning of New Year's. However, Frieren's tendency to be indifferent towards things has caused her to sleep in and miss the sunrise in the past. However, her newfound resolve to learn more about humans and make the most of the present moment inspires her to try and not repeat the same mistake again. But her bed is just a little bit too comfortable. She sleeps in again, but thankfully she's awoken by Fern, who Frieren is thankful to. They make their way to the sunrise, and Frieren admits that it is quite beautiful, but nothing to wake up early over. However, when she looks at Fern, she sees the wonder and joy in her eyes as she looks upon the sunrise in amazement. The joy inside of Fern brings joy to Frieren, and Frieren realizes why Himmel and the others had so desperately wanted her to view the sunrise with them. There's a Swedish proverb which states, "Shared joy is a double joy." I think in this moment, Frieren is starting to learn a little bit more about why her mere 10-year journey, as she calls it, was so impactful. This is just one part of the puzzle, but Frieren has now definitely come to a better understanding of why connecting and sharing experiences with others is more meaningful than she had originally thought. In talking about this moment, I also can't help but think forwards to the First Class Mage arc, in which Fern explains how she feels joy when she sees Frieren hunting for treasure, because she sees the joy that it brings to Frieren, and it in turn brings joy to her. The experience of feeling joy through the joy of others is just another one of the many beautiful aspects of this story. In my number 2 spot, it's the scene in which Frieren cries over the passing of Himmel. At first, Frieren seems relatively unaffected. After all, she's an elf who lives for thousands of years, so why would a mere 10-year relationship with somebody, which is only a fraction of her life, hold any sort of meaning, value, or significance? But as Frieren shows, it clearly does. I love this moment because it really encapsulates so much of what the story is about and who Frieren is as a character. For so many years, Frieren wandered around aimlessly with no real intention of doing anything of note. No relationships, no connections, and no rush whatsoever. But those seemingly insignificant 10 years with her team, and especially with Himmel, changed her. Frieren as a story argues against the perceived insignificance of our actions. If you want to give this story an incredibly broad and encapsulating description, it really is about meaninglessness versus meaning in life. And ultimately, our actions, our connections, the choices we make, and the energy that we put into the world is in fact significant, and can, without a doubt, have a positive impact on the world around us and those that we interact with. And the hero party, especially Himmel, absolutely impacted Frieren, and she very clearly carries them with her as she proceeds on her new journey. Frieren then takes what she learned from her past experiences with the hero party and implements them into her interactions with her new family. By doing this, Himmel and the others not only live on inside of Frieren, but also inside the lives of those she's touched along the path of her journey. The impact that Himmel and the others had on Frieren ultimately inspired her to see the world and those around her in a totally new way. Now that she knows how seemingly insignificant or small things can really be meaningful and impactful, she less frequently takes these things for granted. Not taking anything for granted and appreciating the moment as it is before you is one of my many takeaways from this amazing series. Finally, in my top spot, it's the interaction between Frieren and Saria towards the end of the first season, when Frieren is asked what her favorite spell is. To this, she replies that it is the spell taught to her by her master Flam, which is one that creates a beautiful field of flowers. This scene is effectively the evidence of the claim made by the story that we just touched on in the second moment. Our actions, connections, and energy that we put into the world are in fact not insignificant, but impactful and meaningful. Saria despises the fact that this is Frieren's favorite spell because she sees it as meaningless. If we think of this spell to create a field of flowers as representing our actions, connections, and energy that we put into the world, then I think we can better understand why this scene is so important. Saria decries these as being meaningless and useless, but Frieren now knows that the opposite of that is true. It is revealed in a flashback that Frieren had once encountered Himmel when he was a child lost in the forest. Frieren doesn't remember this, but Himmel explains to her how he was scared, lonely, and couldn't find his way back home. And in that moment, Frieren pointed him in the right direction and used the spell to create flowers, to light up the night and provide young Himmel with a feeling of comfort. A seemingly small act of kindness, and one that Frieren didn't even remember herself. But does that make it meaningless like Saria claims? Absolutely not. This act of kindness from Frieren inspired Himmel to seek her out later in life and ask her to join his team. So ultimately, it was this seemingly small act of Frieren which set Himmel on the path to recruit her, which ultimately led to their 10-year journey, which in turn inspired Frieren to view the world and those close to her the way that she does today.